Hi there, John T. Hickmet here. Welcome to my channel. In today's video, I want to talk about how we've been taught, particularly in the West, to relate to our mind and body. Why that way of understanding doesn't really equip us to know what's actually going on when symptoms arise and what we can begin to do instead. Because a lot of people aren't just dealing with pain or symptoms, they're dealing with confusion. They're dealing with fear. They're dealing with this sense that something must be going wrong in their body and they don't know how to relate to it anymore. So this video is really dedicated to anyone who's developed chronic symptoms in their life, including myself. I had chronic back pain and stomach pain for many years, and I wish I'd understood some of what I'm going to talk about here much earlier on. It's also dedicated to anyone who's been on that familiar carousel of treatments, going from doctor to doctor, specialist to specialist, trying to solve the migraines, the stomach pain, the back pain, the tinnitus, the anxiety, the depression, either being told it's in your head or being given prescriptions or procedures or being told this is something you'll need to manage long term and never really heal. I'm not here to blame anyone. I'm not here to say there's anything malicious or nefarious going on. I'm not interested in speculating about intention or motive behind any of these medical institutions. I generally don't know why this is a dominant way we've been taught to relate to the body. All I know is that for many people, including myself, it hasn't been conducive to long-term well-being. So this is what I'm going to explore today. It's not an accusation, it's just an observation of what's going on. Because when people come to see me, they've usually done everything they were told to do. They've followed the protocols, they've tried the treatments, they've taken the medication, they've been compliant, diligent, and patient, and their symptoms still persist. This happened to me as well. And then on the other side of this work, when people do start to feel better, including myself, there's often this realization that it wasn't that our bodies were ever broken. It was that the way we've been taught to relate to our body didn't make sense for chronic symptoms. In the West, in particular, we're largely taught to see the body as a collection of mechanical parts. Each part has its own specialists, it has its own medication, it has its own procedures. And in many ways, that model has been incredibly helpful. You know, emergency medicine, surgery, acute care, these things, it saves lives every day. But where this model really falls short is when it comes to chronic symptoms, because it doesn't teach us how the body heals as a whole system. We're not taught to understand the mind and body as one integrated process. We're taught to isolate, to label, and to fix what's going on. And that shapes our expectations of healing. Externally, we actually understand healing quite well. If you get a cut or a bruise, you don't panic when it hurts. You don't assume something's wrong because it's sore. You expect it to hurt while it heals. You can see it with your own eyes. You trust the process. You give it time. But internally, we don't have that same relationship. It's a broken relationship. When sensations arise inside the body, pain, tension, tightness, anxiety, we assume there must be danger. We assume malfunction. We assume something is going wrong. And part of the reason for that is because we haven't been taught how emotions live in the body, how stress is stored, how long-term suppression, control, and adaptation can create real physical symptoms, chronic symptoms in the body. We haven't been taught how the internal healing process actually works. So when sensations change, when symptoms move, when intensity shows up, we interpret that through a very narrow lens, through this Western lens. We've also been taught that healing only counts if it's immediate. Take this pill, do this treatment, and unless the symptom goes away quickly, it hasn't worked. That expectation, it follows people everywhere, into the mind and body work as well, even into meditation. So when someone starts an approach like the one I talk about here, an allowing approach, and it doesn't immediately calm everything down, they assume it must be wrong or irrelevant. And that's a huge misunderstanding of how this work actually functions, because very often when we start allowing rather than suppressing, things don't immediately get quieter, they get louder. When emotions have been held down for years, sometimes decades, they don't gently whisper when they're finally given space. They come through with energy. People in this healing process, they may notice shaking in new or old places, old symptoms resurfacing, symptoms around the body. This is where people panic. They think this must mean that things are going wrong. The allowing approach is making me feel worse, so things are going wrong. But very often, this is exactly what things look like when they're going right. This is what it looks like when the body finally feels safe enough to start releasing what it's been holding. And this brings me to a really important subtlety in this work because it confuses almost everyone at first. We often talk about learning to allow emotions, learning to sit with discomfort, learning to not be afraid of what's happening in the body. And then people understandably think, well, hang on, if I'm allowing fear, doesn't that mean I shouldn't be afraid anymore? And this is where this nuance matters, and I'll speak about it in every single video if I have to. In this work, fear is not the problem. We're not trying to get rid of fear. We're not trying to transcend fear and go to a different place. We're not trying to make fear disappear. We're learning to welcome fear. And that can feel very confusing at first. It's not what we've been taught to do because fear still shows up, sometimes strongly, sometimes in waves, sometimes alongside pain, sensations, or emotions. The difference isn't that fear stops appearing. The difference is that we stop interpreting fear as a sign that something is wrong. Fear becomes something that we can be with, rather than something we need to escape. It's a huge distinction. This also goes directly against the way we've been taught to understand healing in the West. We've been taught that healing should feel relieving, calming, reassuring, that if something feels difficult, intense, or unsettling, it must be a problem, it must be dangerous. So when people start this work and things don't immediately calm down, they think they're failing. But actually, they're learning a completely new relationship with their internal world. And everyone I work with goes through this phase many times, including myself. There's ups and downs, moments of clarity, moments of doubt, times where things make complete sense, and times where it all feels confusing again and we're back to square one. And then, over time, and the timeline is different for everyone, something starts to shift. You begin to notice that you're relating to your body differently. You're not scanning for danger in the same way. You're not panicking every time a sensation comes up. And you start to look back at your life differently. Everything prior to chronic symptoms. All the allergies you had, the random infections, the symptoms that came and went. Things you once thought meant you were broken, back in your past. And you start to see that perhaps these weren't signs that something was wrong. Perhaps they were your body responding, adapting, and trying to guide you towards a different way of relating to the mind and body. And this is where a different interpretation of the mind and body becomes possible. It can begin to look as though symptoms don't arise to punish us, or because we're defective, but because the mind and body are asking us to listen in a way we haven't been taught how to listen before. Almost as if chronic symptoms persist because the old way of relating isn't working anymore. Only on the other side of healing, many people realize that the journey itself taught them how the mind and body actually wanted to be related to. Not through control, not through this Western lens of fear, but through allowance, attention, and trust. By the time people feel better, whatever that means for them, on whatever timeline, it becomes clear that this is a skill. This isn't luck. It isn't special. It isn't reserved for a few people healing from chronic symptoms. It's learnable. And yes, at first it can feel like you're relearning how to operate, like you're questioning everything you thought you knew about your mind and your body. But when you consider that most of us have lived inside one paradigm for decades, 3 or 4 decades sometimes, a few months of learning a new way of relating isn't actually very long at all. Especially when that learning gives you something you didn't have before. A sense of trust, a sense of safety with your own experience, a sense that fear, discomfort, and sensation don't mean you're in danger. I also want to be clear about something else, something very important. This video isn't saying you'll never need doctors again. It isn't saying you'll never get sick. It isn't saying medical care is irrelevant. Medical care absolutely has its place, especially when it comes to safety, stabilization, and emergency care in particular. So if medication is helping you feel safe right now, that's also okay. So this work isn't about ripping support away. It's about changing the foundation of how you relate to your mind and body. Over time, as trust builds and your nervous system settles, as you learn to be with sensations and emotions and fear and without panicking, you may find you rely less on external supports, but that's gradual. It's not forced. So if you're taking medication, that's completely fine. The core of this approach is learning to allow. Allow emotions to exist without immediately trying to fix them, without trying to fix them at all. Allow sensations to be present without interpreting them as threats. Allow the body to do what it knows how to do. It knows how to heal. And yes, that often means things will feel more intense before they feel easier. Not because you're failing, but because you're finally feeling. Just like a cut healing on the skin is a kind of quiet miracle, it's a miracle that happens. Internal healing is a complex, intelligent, adaptive process as well, but it requires a different relationship with our mind and body. It requires patience, it requires trust, and very often it requires support, because learning to relate to your body in a new way, not through fear and control, but through curiosity and allowance, goes against everything most of us were taught in the West. That's why guidance matters, that's why community matters. This work is about learning to live in your body differently. It's about recognizing that the very traits that once helped you survive, perfectionism, people-pleasing, high achievement, control, can keep symptoms in place if they're applied too rigidly to healing. And it's about learning to soften that grip. So if you're watching this and recognizing yourself, if you've been stuck in the symptom fixing loop, I want you to know that there is another way to relate to what's happening. It's not a quick fix. It's not a magic solution, but a deeper, more sustainable relationship with your mind and body. And that's what I continue to explore on this channel, on all my videos. I continually speak about how we need to welcome fear. We need to cultivate this new relationship with our mind and body. How the old way of relating to the mind and body is no longer relevant. How symptoms often occur because it's forcing us to relate to our mind and body in a way that it knows is going to be more conducive to our well-being in the long term. It's going to empower us. As soon as we can surrender, allow what is, things will get bigger, things will feel more intense. But this doesn't mean it's dangerous. Just because there's not immediate relief, it doesn't mean that it's wrong. That's just what we've learned to do. If we can get out of the way, let things get big, let things last as long as they need to, you find the nervous system will regulate in the timeline that it needs to. You've learned this old paradigm for decades and decades. This new paradigm will take you a couple of months. It can feel very big and it can feel like it's a long time when you're in it. But before you know it, you've learned this new way of relating to your mind and body. Symptoms become a thing of the past. So if you'd like to learn how to do this, you can ask questions below. If you're watching this on YouTube, if you're watching this in my community, please share what you want to share below. Any questions, any shares. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Hopefully speak to you soon.